my panelists for being here today. It's safe to say, you guys, if anyone was to know anything, it would be you guys. You are at the forefront of the emerging threats in cybersecurity that we're seeing today, which is what we're here to talk about. So I wanted to start with Wendi. You know, Unit 42 is frontline. You are dealing with your consulting. You are responding to cybersecurity incidents. What have you seen in the past 12 months that's been particularly concerning to you?
Yeah, so Ed, great setting the stage, right? So a little bit more background, right? My teams are on the ground 24/7 working with our clients. We're investigating breaches, we're correlating threat intelligence, and we're hunting for new attacks across the world on a 24/7 basis. I heard the question asked earlier about why are these attacks being successful? You know, why does every major breach that we've seen in the news, you know, many of which our teams are on the ground responding to. And the reality is it's because criminals are making money by stealing our data. And it is far more expensive for organizations to defend against these attacks than it is for the attackers to propagate them. So what are we seeing? Increased scale, increased speed in particular, sophistication as well. But from a scale perspective, it's nearly impossible to understand every single software application you have in your environment. What hardware exists in every single department? What does your external attack surface look like? And each of those are avenues into these organizations. And now from a scale perspective, it's incredibly more challenging on a daily basis. And speed, these attackers are moving very quickly, right? We're talking about hours to exfiltrate terabytes of data in many cases. So it's becoming incredibly more challenging for organizations to respond to this at a comprehensive scale. And when we look at cyber criminals, these are not attackers that are in a basement. They are living in penthouses now. That paradigm has really shifted.
And Michael, I'll bring you in. You know, Rubrik was very open about being the victim of a ransomware attack last year. It was Klopp ransomware gang. So you understand what it's like to kind of be on the receiving end of that, as well as advising, obviously, your customers as a cybersecurity company. Can you tell us a little bit more about you know, any updates that you had there in terms of the attackers, anything that you've learned from how to respond, and maybe things that you've changed at Rubrik as a result?
I mean, the incident was relatively small and contained, so the incident response team worked. The incident response plan works very, very well. We had, I would argue, a reasonable communications campaign to customers about, you know, what transpired. We had a number of different internal calls with various different customers who were looking for more information, and I think we facilitated that quite well. I think the thing that, you know, is prevalent in the industry today, or in the cyberspace today, is cyber criminals aren't breaking in. Predominantly, they're logging in. And so where I came from in the federal government, spent a number of different years with teams that looked at very comprehensive insider threat detection programs, looking for a bad actor who is a member of your community. But you fast forward to today, and with cyber criminals using legitimate credentials to log into organizations, it's really not so much, so this world is blending. I need to now look for behavior of all of my users, be they synthetic life forms, silicon life forms, or carbon life forms, and I need to be able to determine whether or not they're a malicious actor on any given day. I have to understand the patterns of life for all of my accounts and users, because I need to understand what a good Monday looks like and what a bad Monday looks like. And this is predominantly because of the theft of credentials, and then using those credentials to simply log in to environments and perpetrate cybercrime.
And I'll come to Charlotte on that. Is there a particular threat that you think is pertinent at the moment, or it's interesting about this credential theft and this kind of people, you know, we don't know who people are anymore. Remote working has meant that we're not in the office anymore. We're kind of not behind the firewall. We are seeing people just brute force calling up employees, pretending they're an IT desk support worker, and convincing them to just log in for them, essentially.
Absolutely. These identity-based attacks are becoming incredibly prevalent in the security space. Identity is at the absolute sort of the forefront of security. These types of attacks that you talk about, where we see threat actors such as Get a Spider, who are using impersonation of employees to contact the IT service desk to essentially compromise internal systems, those are becoming more and more prevalent every day. Around internal sort of insider threats, and one of the mitigations that we see in identity is really about how do you use stronger identity, modern identity technologies to mitigate that threat. So really looking at using phishing-resistant MFA, using passwordless security keys, biometrics, and on top of that, it's layering that security culture with a training and awareness around how to be alert and how to be aware of these identity-based attacks that we're seeing, whether it be on the IT service desk or deep fakes. This is something that the organization as a whole needs to be very cognizant of and know that the identity protections that we put in place are there for a very real reason.
And I'm glad you brought up Scattered Spider, just a fascinating threat group that has been in the headlines a lot. And they have been reportedly very focused on Okta itself, because it being the kind of verification tool that a lot of companies they want to get into uses, they want to break into people's Okta accounts. What are you doing to kind of work with that? Like, how are you educating your customers on, what exactly can you do if someone has just told a hacker their account details and then they're able to log in?
Absolutely. So let me tell a little bit to the audience about Scattered Spider. They are a highly prolific cybercriminal group, and they are prolific, aggressive, and effective in their social engineering attacks. What we've seen with the type of activity across a number of different organizations, Twilio, MGM, Caesar, is that they are using those social engineering techniques to infiltrate and essentially access the internal systems. I'm sorry, could you ask me the question again?
So what to do if someone, what are you telling people to do, or what are you thinking at Okta about this group that is targeting Okta specifically?
So we do a lot of education with our customers around using strong authentication methods. So phishing-resistant MFA is an incredibly powerful tool that can be used here, really looking at passwordless, biometric security keys so that you can ensure that the potential for a successful phishing attack is mitigated before it can begin. To your point around the telemetry as well, I think that it's incredibly important for organizations to use the telemetry that they can get from their various technology stack in the security space, to use that information to make real-time decisions about when to take action and respond to some anomalous activity that's been detected. We have an identity threat protection product that is an AI-based tool where we can take a number of different telemetry feeds from other technologies like Zscaler, like other security technologies, and really use that to put the power back into the hands of the Security Operations Center to make those decisions in real time. So see that anomalous behavior and then take that action. And I think that's incredibly important to pick up on these signals quickly, where potentially the methods at which the attackers are using are being detected.
And back to Scattered Spider, so a group of sources say 17 to 25-year-old young men, primarily in the US and Western Europe. Have you learned anything more about them, because they are, Okta is such a target? Have you been doing any investigations into trying to identify them, working with law enforcement? Can you tell us a little bit about what you found?
Absolutely. So you mentioned this. So they do target Okta. They are not an Okta-centric organization. It's really around a number of different identity providers, so including Microsoft. The attribution of this group has been incredibly interesting to follow. So we reported on Scattered Spider as Scatter Swine originally in August 2022. And the murkiness of the attribution of this group is quite interesting. They are a very loosely affiliated collective of individuals globally who are focused on criminal activity. They are incredibly determined. They are very adept, and also they have a very strong level of understanding around identity infrastructure. And so they're leveraging all of that, and I think the global network that they have to perform these attacks at scale. We are continuing to monitor them. And in the security space, there are a number of people who are highly interested in trying to figure out sort of more about this group. But the typical cyber threat intelligence groupings that we provide around these threat actors is very, very difficult because of the loose affiliation that they have. As a globally dispersed group of individuals, it's
all
very
the different names: scattered spider, scattered swine. I think octotempest, octopus. It can get confusing. Wendy, you were on the Department of Homeland Security's Cyber Safety Review Board, and last month they put out a report about Microsoft. Can you tell us a little bit about the kind of behind the scenes of that investigation and the importance of telling software companies that much of the world relies on to do better?
Well, so as part of this CSRB, we've released 3 reports. First was on Log4j. Second was on Lapsus, which included Octopus, the threat actor, as well as what we're now really calling Scattered Spider, Muddled Libra. And I think one of the great things that came out of that report, right, and those attacks was actually specific to new ways of authentication mechanisms as we look at IAM deployments. And so certainly, Okta is a prominent example. Every single one of us are under attack, though, by these organizations on a daily basis. And so what we really focused on there was looking at, okay, how can we build more secure deployments? And I know our organization's a large partner of yours, and we have seen just an absolute shift in the way that we do authentication individually. The third report, which you mentioned, related to Microsoft and cloud security. It's important to mention that myself, as well as a number of board members, both civilian and government, were recused from that investigation. So I do not have direct insight into those findings. That said, you've highlighted, the Microsoft CEO sent an email last Friday to employees globally talking about not only security from a leadership perspective and how they will make changes, but changing sales compensation plans. That's unheard of. So no doubt that all of us on the CRB have really been excited about the ability and the opportunity to impact change, which is what we need to do at scale, right? Impact change from awareness within organizations to users to leadership making security a priority in their culture, to then government working together from a policy lens and a regulatory capacity to impact change in a way that's positive. One of the things that I think we're all very persistent about on the board is that we should not be punishing victims. We have this idea that we don't go after let's say financial services institutions. If one of their bank teller gets held up at gunpoint and they provide some money, we don't say, why did you do that? We go after organizations in the civilian landscape who are trying to effectively defend themselves against foreign intelligence services and incredible military regimes. There's no reason why we should be punishing the victims, but really looking at collectively, how do we make it easier for CISOs throughout the world to do their job effectively and all of us to protect our secrets?
This week was RSA. San Francisco is filled with cybersecurity professionals. The cybersecurity industry is doing incredibly well. But we're hearing about so many high-profile, really devastating cyber attacks. What is going wrong? What do we need to do to stop this problem from happening? Obviously, it's never going to completely go away, but do we need to do things like look at ransom payments? Should that be ended? More regulation? Who should the onus be on?
That's a great question, right? And it's a very complex answer because it's not one situation, right? You can look at technology providers who are doing everything from investing a lot of money to make more secure technologies, to firms who are looking to decrease the impact by quick detection, rapid response. But I have maybe an unpopular opinion, right? I think from a ransomware lens in particular, we need to stop the flow of the money that's occurring. We need to make it much more difficult for hackers to be able to propagate those attacks. And so cryptocurrency is a way that these attacks are facilitated. It's not possible for them to do it the same way through traditional banking institutions because the flow of the money is different, and that identity is a critical component of that. So certainly some questions there about how seriously do we want to take this so we can make it more easy and more successful for us to defend against these type of attacks.
Yeah, I think if I could, Wendi highlights the point, which is this is about economics. And until the economic incentive is taken out of cybercrime, cybercrime is going to persist because there's money to be made in cybercrime. Cyber Ventures a few years ago posted that they said that the cybercrime industry was going to be a $10.5 trillion business by 2025. And they got some pushback on those numbers. But think about that. $10.5 trillion is the third largest economy on the planet. And so that's the scale of the cybercrime that's being perpetuated. And unless you take the money out of this, then it's going to perpetuate itself. I will say just real quickly, Rubrik Zero Labs produces a report on kind of the state of data. And one of the statistics, if there was nothing else you remembered from reading the most recent report, if you have an effective backup, if you can restore your business operations, if that cannot be compromised by a cyber criminal, you are 27 times less likely to pay a ransomware event. So, I mean, I think that there are effective mechanisms organizations can take to make it less of a financial incentive for cyber criminals, but until more and more organizations do that, cybercrime is going to perpetuate itself.
But the threat actors are aware of that, and they're now moving to, just saying, well, I know your systems will be able to continue running, but I'm going to leak data.
They can too, and so data loss prevention and making sure that your data is encrypted. I mean, the extortion piece is out there as well, but I mean, I think that the problem is a very large problem. You need to start taking bits and pieces of the problem and solving for those, and then investing resources in different places as you go through it.
There's a number of different ways you can do it, and the data example is a great example. And I think there's a lot of organizations that are now making this shift, especially in the data security space, of really looking at what is the security posture of all my data? Where are all the flows going for that data? And do I know how it's secured? Who has access to it? Where it could be potentially leaked? And I think that's an incredible decision to make on top of the resiliency decision that many organizations have already invested in for many years. It is a new space, I think, that we're looking into in terms of better understanding how the data ecosystem in an organization could represent a risk to your position, whether it's your brand reputation or your financial position.
We've got a question here. I don't know who it's from, but compared to in-office work, is the cyber threat exponentially greater for companies that allow their workers to work from home or other public locations? Who would like, Charlotte?
I'll start. I'm really staring into this a lot. We have shifted to a remote-based operating model en masse globally. And so I'm hoping that many organizations have spent some time now really thinking about how they balance that move with enabling the end users, but also ensuring that the security risks that poses are mitigated. So things like ensuring that the end user device is locked down to the degree that you feel comfortable with as a company, removing local admin rights, making sure everything is behind a VPN or secure web gateway, making sure that users know that they have to use strong authentication methods to be able to log into those applications, so phishing-resistant MFA and passwordless security keys. So if you mitigate the potential for that end user to be compromised, I really think that the risk of remote working is significantly reduced, and enabling people within companies to do that is paramount for security teams.
Does anyone have any insight into whether more companies, when the attack happens, kind of the first, when they first get in, that is when someone's remote working? I don't know if there's any... Anecdotally,
I would say I've been doing these investigations for 22 years now, and they were happening at a likely very similar scale for the last 20 years. Those of us have been on the government side, right? We couldn't talk about it for a long time. And what's changed, though, I think in a positive light, is awareness that we are talking about it and sharing it. But certainly ransomware and that shift towards a criminal actual outcome, which becomes very disruptive from a business impact, that's changed, and that's different from a nation state going in very stealthily stealing information from an organization. The organization's aware of it, they're working with law enforcement, but it generally doesn't make itself to the news in the same way. So I think what we've done with remote work is we've extended the attack surface, so there are more opportunities for attackers to potentially go after. But to your point, there are a lot of technologies that have been put in place to really effectively defend that. So the perimeter is broader, but I think that the same threats are really there.
And we're going to mention AI. I know that's been the topic of conversation everywhere, but we can't not. Do you think the AI threat within cybersecurity is overblown, and it is more about the kind of methods we've been talking about, brute force, social engineering, just pretending you're the person, that you're the employee? Or do you think that right now in 2024, AI does pose a real threat?
I mean, I think, let's go back to your question on scattered spider and why they are effective, right? They have been effective at compromising identities because they are adept at the cultures and customs of the West. They are fluent language speakers. If you take that to AI, well, now in theory, right, anybody can be fluent in any language. They can be adept at the customs and courtesies of any particular culture. So from a threat perspective, I think it lowers the bar for actors to enter into cybercrime. Does it generally manifest the threats overall? I don't know that I'm convinced on that yet, but I think the barrier to entry, just like the barrier to entry from when the advent of cloud computing lowered the barrier for entry for companies to start, I think the advent of a generative AI lowers the barrier to entry for cybercrime.
I agree. We have seen, especially in the phishing attack space, a significant increase in successful phishing attacks being as the result of using AI. And so it's a cat and mouse game. We know that the cyber criminals are going to be leveraging AI to be more successful, quicker, and perform attacks at scale. We in turn need to make sure that we are baking in the right AI solutions in the way that we detect that and respond to that. And so I see a lot of benefit in a lot of the security tooling that we have today in terms of leveraging generative AI so that we can really detect in real time and respond in real time to these threats that we are seeing the hackers use as well. So.
And I think that every single company that we work for here, right, have invested a tremendous amount of money in building out those technologies. So even though I operate in a world where I don't trust a lot of people related to the attacks we investigate, I will still remain an optimist, and I see the things that we are doing. The software development lifecycle, being able to enable our developers to create more secure code because there's continuous testing versus a development and testing later on, right? These are integrated flows. The ability for our responders to automate these types of platforms and essentially processes that we work through today. The same in Security Operations Center, right? So we are able to start really automating those at scale, enabling us to do more detection more quickly, and then respond rapidly and allocate time for our humans to solve the most challenging problems because we've enabled the machines to help us in solving the more repetitive processes. And I think those are all positive advancements.
And do you think then with that's great talking about the positive side, but kind of going back to more what Michael mentioned, it's this kind of juicing up of social engineering and, scattered spider on roids, basically. Does education need to change then? Do we need to be thinking about, do training videos need to be sent out teaching your employees how to spot a deepfake? Are we at that point? Or what can companies be thinking about to prepare for that?
We, sorry, Michael, just a few months ago, we had an incredibly, perfectly voiced deep fake of our CEO, Todd, that some employees received around wiring them money. And it was incredible. It sounded just like him. And so using that to then educate the broader team around this threat is real and what to look out for, especially in an election year, around deep fakes and what they should be looking for is paramount to the organization. And just reminding them, I think, of the two things, the security hygiene practices that we expect of them in terms of how they are seeing these things. And then to your point you made, Wendi, around removing the barrier for them to be able to report or be okay with saying, hey, I got something and I don't think it's okay. I'm not really certain if it's right. We need to allow for that culture to manifest in an organization so that the employees feel comfortable saying, I don't know if I did the right thing. And I think that's part of, educating on deep fakes at this stage.
Yeah, I have received a video from Michael Bloomberg telling me that I clicked on a dummy phishing link before, so that was not good. The first few months as a cybersecurity reporter. So it can happen to everyone. Well, look, thank you so much for speaking with me.